Marcus had always been different from the other royal guards. While his fellow soldiers followed orders without question, Marcus questioned everything. He stood at his post outside the grand palace gates, watching the morning sun paint the marble walls gold, but his mind was elsewhere. The other guards whispered about him behind his back. They called him stubborn, rebellious, and dangerous. Captain Aldrich had warned him countless times that a guard who doesn't follow orders is no guard at all. But Marcus couldn't help himself. When he saw something wrong, he spoke up. When he witnessed injustice, he acted. 3 weeks ago, he had refused to arrest an old baker who couldn't pay his taxes. The man was sick, his wife had just died, and he was struggling to feed his grandchildren. The order came directly from Lord Chancellor Grimwald, but Marcus simply walked away. He later anonymously left coins at the baker's door, enough to cover the taxes and more. 2 weeks before that, he had questioned why the royal guards were ordered to turn away hungry children from the palace kitchens when there was food going to waste. His superior officer had him scrubbing floors for a week as punishment. Marcus touched the sword at his side, feeling its familiar weight. He had joined the Royal Guard 5 years ago with dreams of serving justice and protecting the innocent. Instead, he found himself part of a system that often protected the wealthy and powerful while ignoring the suffering of common people. The youngest princess, Elena, was only 16 years old, but Marcus had noticed something special about her. Unlike her older siblings, who seemed interested only in parties and privileges, Elena often asked the servants about their families. She would stop to pet stray cats in the courtyard and always thanked the guards personally. Last month, Marcus had seen her crying in the rose garden after overhearing her father discuss arranging her marriage to a foreign prince she had never met. She wiped her tears quickly when she noticed Marcus nearby, but he pretended not to see. Even princesses deserved privacy for their pain. Today felt different somehow. There was tension in the air that made Marcus's skin crawl. Servants hurried through the corridors with worried expressions, and even the birds seemed quieter than usual. Something was brewing in the palace, and Marcus's instincts told him it wasn't good. Captain Aldrich approached with heavy footsteps, his armor clanking with each step. His face was grim, and he carried a sealed scroll. Marcus straightened but didn't salute. He had stopped following that particular protocol months ago, much to his captain's irritation. "Marcus," Aldrich said, his voice tired, "I have new orders for you." "What kind of orders?" Marcus asked, crossing his arms. Aldrich's jaw tightened. "The kind you follow without asking questions." But Marcus had learned that the orders requiring blind obedience were usually the ones most worth questioning. He had seen too many good soldiers do terrible things simply because someone with authority told them to. "Tell me what the orders are, and I'll decide if they're worth following," Marcus replied calmly. The captain's face turned red with anger. Other guards nearby stopped their conversations to listen. This kind of open defiance was rare even for Marcus. "You don't get to decide anything," Aldrich shouted. "You're a guard, not a general. Your job is to obey, not to think." Marcus had heard this speech many times before. He looked past the captain toward the palace windows, wondering if Princess Elena was watching from somewhere inside. She had once told him that she admired people who stood up for what they believed in, even when it was difficult. "My job is to protect the innocent and serve justice," Marcus said quietly. "If your orders align with that, I'll follow them gladly. If they don't, then we have a problem." The other guards shifted uncomfortably. They respected Marcus as a fighter and a good man, but his attitude toward authority made them nervous. In their world, disobedience could mean execution. Aldrich stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Marcus could hear. "These orders come from the king himself. There's no room for interpretation or conscience. You will follow them, or you will be stripped of your rank and thrown in the dungeons." Marcus met his captain's eyes steadily. He had faced this threat before, and somehow he always ended up keeping his position. Perhaps because deep down even his superiors knew that Marcus was one of the few guards who truly cared about doing what was right. "Show me the orders," Marcus said. With trembling hands, Aldrich broke the royal seal and unrolled the scroll. As he read the contents, his face grew pale. Marcus watched his captain's expression change from anger to horror to something that looked like despair. "What is it?" Marcus asked, suddenly concerned. Aldrich looked around to make sure no one else could hear, then leaned close to Marcus. "The king has ordered the immediate arrest of Princess Elena. She's to be taken to the tower and held until further notice." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Princess Elena was the kindest member of the royal family, beloved by the servants and common people alike. What could she possibly have done to warrant arrest? On what charges? He asked. Treason, Aldrich whispered. She's been accused of conspiring with foreign agents against the crown. Marcus knew immediately that this was impossible. He had observed Elena carefully, and she spent her time reading books, helping in the palace gardens, and secretly giving food to hungry children. The idea of her plotting against her own father was ridiculous. This is madness, Marcus said. Elena would never betray her family or her kingdom. Aldrich nodded grimly. You and I both know that. But orders are orders, and if we don't carry them out, someone else will. At least if we do it, we can make sure she's treated gently. Marcus stared at the scroll in his captain's hands, feeling sick to his stomach. This was exactly the kind of order he had always feared receiving. How could he protect an innocent person by arresting them? How could he serve justice by carrying out an injustice? I won't do it, he said finally. Aldrich closed his eyes and sighed deeply. I was afraid you'd say that. Marcus spent the rest of the day watching the palace corridors, waiting for other guards to come for Princess Elena. His refusal to carry out the arrest order had created chaos among the royal guard leadership. Captain Aldrich had tried to assign the task to other soldiers, but word of Marcus's defiance had spread quickly. The palace servants whispered in corners, casting nervous glances at the guards. Everyone could sense that something terrible was about to happen, but no one dared speak openly about it. Marcus noticed that several of the younger guards seemed troubled by the arrest order, though none were brave enough to refuse outright as he had done. As evening approached, Marcus positioned himself near the library, where Princess Elena often spent her time reading. He had decided that if other guards came to arrest her, he would at least try to warn her first. It wasn't much, but it was something. Princess Elena emerged from the library carrying a thick book about ancient history. She moved gracefully down the corridor, nodding politely to the servants she passed. Her long dark hair was braided with small flowers, and she wore a simple blue dress that made her look younger than her 16 years. When she saw Marcus standing near a window, she smiled and walked over to him. Good evening, Sir Marcus. You look troubled tonight. Is everything well? Marcus had always been impressed by Elena's ability to notice other people's emotions. Unlike her siblings who seemed to live in their own world of privilege and pleasure, Elena paid attention to the people around her. Your Highness, he said, bowing slightly. I'm afraid I have something important to tell you. Elena's smile faded as she noticed the serious tone in his voice. She glanced around to make sure they were alone, then stepped closer. What is it? She asked quietly. Marcus struggled with how much to tell her. Warning her about the arrest order could be seen as treason itself, but staying silent felt like betrayal of everything he believed in. There are people in the palace who wish you harm, he said carefully. You should be very careful about where you go and who you trust. Elena's eyes widened with fear but also confusion. I don't understand. What have I done wrong? I spend my days reading and helping in the gardens. I've never hurt anyone. I know, Marcus said, but sometimes innocent people get caught in political games they don't understand. Before Elena could respond, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the corridor. A group of 6 royal guards approached, led by Sir Garrett, one of Captain Aldrich's most loyal soldiers. Garrett was known for following orders without question, no matter how distasteful they might be. Princess Elena, Garrett called out in a loud official voice, by order of His Majesty the King, you are under arrest for treason against the crown. Elena's face went completely white. She gripped the book in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's no mistake, Your Highness, Garrett replied coldly. You will come with us now to the tower, where you will await trial. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between the guards and the princess. On what evidence is this arrest based? He demanded. Garrett's expression hardened. That's not your concern, Marcus. Step aside immediately or you'll join her in the tower. I want to see the evidence, Marcus insisted. Princess Elena deserves to know what she's being accused of. The other guards shifted uncomfortably. They all knew Elena personally, and the idea of arresting her felt wrong to many of them. But they also knew the consequences of disobeying direct orders from the king. The evidence is classified, Garrett said. Now step aside. That's an order. Marcus looked back at Elena, who was trembling with fear and confusion. Tears had started to form in her eyes, but she was trying hard to maintain her dignity. In that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. "No," he said firmly. "I won't step aside, and I won't let you arrest an innocent person based on secret accusations." Garrett's hand moved to the sword at his side. "You're making a terrible mistake, Marcus. Move now or I'll move you myself." "Try it," Marcus replied, his own hand resting on his weapon. The tension in the corridor became suffocating. The other guards looked back and forth between Garrett and Marcus, unsure what to do. They respected both men, but they were caught between conflicting loyalties. Princess Elena suddenly stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's arm. "Please," she said softly. "I don't want anyone to be hurt because of me. If my father truly wants me arrested, then I'll go peacefully." Marcus felt his heart breaking as he looked down at her brave, frightened face. She was willing to sacrifice herself to prevent violence even though she had done nothing wrong. "Your Highness," he said gently, "you shouldn't have to face this alone." Elena managed a small, sad smile. "I won't be alone. I know there are good people like you who believe in justice. That gives me strength." But as Elena started to step toward Garrett and his men, Marcus made another decision. He had spent 5 years following orders that went against his conscience. He had watched injustice after injustice, telling himself that he was just one man who couldn't change anything. But now, facing the arrest of an innocent girl who had never harmed anyone, he realized that sometimes one person's stand could make all the difference. "Wait," he said, his voice carrying clearly down the corridor. Everyone froze. Marcus stepped in front of Elena again, but this time his posture was different. He wasn't just blocking their path. He was making a declaration. "I formally challenge the validity of this arrest," he announced loudly. "As a sworn protector of the innocent, I invoke my right to demand a trial by combat to determine Princess Elena's guilt or innocence." Gasps echoed through the corridor. Trial by combat was an ancient law that hadn't been used in decades, but it was still technically legal. If Marcus could defeat a chosen champion in single combat, Elena would be declared innocent and freed. Garrett stared at him in shock. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," Marcus replied. "Princess Elena deserves justice, not a secret trial based on hidden evidence. If the accusations against her are true, then God will guide my opponent's sword. If they're false, then justice will prevail." Elena looked up at Marcus with a mixture of gratitude and terror. She understood what he was offering to do for her, and the enormous risk he was taking. The palace had suddenly become very quiet, as if the entire building was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Word of Marcus's challenge spread through the palace like wildfire. Servants whispered excitedly in the kitchens. Nobles gathered in small groups to discuss this unprecedented turn of events, and guards debated whether Marcus had lost his mind or found his courage. King Aldwin himself was forced to respond to the challenge. The ancient law of trial by combat was clear and binding, even for royalty. When a royal guard invoked this right to protect someone from unjust imprisonment, the king had to either provide evidence of guilt in open court or accept the combat trial. Marcus was summoned to the throne room at midnight. He walked through the massive doors to find King Aldwin sitting on his golden throne, surrounded by his advisors and courtiers. Princess Elena stood to one side, flanked by guards but not in chains. Her eyes met Marcus's briefly, and he saw gratitude mixed with deep worry. The king was a tall, imposing man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. He had once been considered fair and just, but years of political pressure had made him suspicious and harsh. Tonight he looked older than his 50 years, as if the weight of his crown was crushing him. "Sir Marcus," the king said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, "you have invoked an ancient right that has not been used in my lifetime. Do you understand the gravity of what you have done?" Marcus stepped forward and bowed respectfully but not deeply. "I understand perfectly, Your Majesty. I have sworn an oath to protect the innocent, and I believe Princess Elena is innocent of any crime against the crown." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Several nobles looked shocked that a mere guard would speak so boldly to the king. Others seemed intrigued by this dramatic turn of events. King Aldwin leaned forward in his throne. "The evidence against my daughter is serious and credible. She has been corresponding with agents of the neighboring kingdom of Valeria, our longtime enemy. These letters contain information about our military defenses and trade agreements. Marcus felt his stomach drop. If this was true, then Elena really was guilty of treason. But as he looked at the princess, he saw genuine confusion and shock on her face. Either she was an incredibly skilled actress, or she truly had no idea what her father was talking about. "May I see these letters, Your Majesty?" Marcus asked. The king gestured to Lord Chancellor Grimwald, a thin, sneering man who had never liked Marcus. Grimwald produced a small bundle of papers tied with a red ribbon. "These were found hidden in the princess's private chambers," Grimwald announced smugly. "They are signed with her personal seal and written in her own handwriting." Marcus took the letters and examined them carefully. The handwriting did look like Elena's elegant script, and the royal seal appeared authentic. But something felt wrong. The paper was too clean for secret correspondence, and the ink looked freshly dried despite supposedly being written over several months. "These letters are forgeries," Marcus said firmly. Gasps filled the throne room. Lord Grimwald's face turned red with anger. "How dare you question evidence examined by the royal investigators?" he sputtered. But Marcus continued studying the papers. His mother had been a scribe before she died, and she had taught him to notice details about writing and documents that most people missed. "The paper is new, but the dates on the letters span 6 months," he explained. "The ink has the same consistency throughout, suggesting they were all written at the same time. And most importantly, Princess Elena is left-handed, but these letters were written by someone right-handed." The pen stroke sloped the wrong direction. A shocked silence fell over the room. Even King Aldwin looked surprised by this observation. Marcus continued his analysis, growing more confident as he spoke. "Furthermore, the information in these letters about our military defenses is outdated by at least 2 years. Anyone currently spying for Valeria would know that we moved the northern garrison last spring and changed our patrol routes after the border incident." Princess Elena stepped forward, her voice clear and strong despite her fear. "Father, I swear by my mother's memory that I have never written these letters or communicated with any foreign agents. I spend my days in the library and gardens. I barely know anything about military matters or trade agreements." King Aldwin studied his daughter's face carefully. He had known her for 16 years, and despite his political suspicions, he could usually tell when she was lying. Tonight she looked completely sincere. "If these letters are forgeries," the king said slowly, "then someone has gone to great lengths to frame the princess. But who would do such a thing, and why?" Marcus had been wondering the same thing. Who benefited from Elena's arrest and disgrace? Who had access to her personal chambers and knowledge of her handwriting? Who wanted her removed from the line of succession? The answer came to him suddenly, and it made his blood run cold. He looked around the room until his eyes settled on Prince Richard, Elena's older brother. Richard stood near the back of the room, trying to look concerned for his sister, but Marcus noticed something others had missed. Richard's right hand bore fresh ink stains. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "I request permission to examine Prince Richard's quarters for evidence related to this matter." The suggestion caused an uproar. Several nobles shouted protests, and Richard himself stepped forward with an expression of outraged innocence. "This is absurd," Richard declared. "I would never harm my own sister. This guard has clearly lost his mind." But King Aldwin was studying his son with the same careful attention he had given Elena. Richard was his heir, next in line for the throne, but he had always been jealous of the affection the people showed for his younger sister. Elena was beloved throughout the kingdom, while Richard was seen as arrogant and cruel. "The trial by combat will proceed as scheduled," the king announced finally. "But Sir Marcus has raised valid questions about the evidence. Tomorrow morning, before the combat begins, we will conduct a thorough investigation of these letters and their origins." Lord Grimwald looked furious at this development. He had been certain that the false evidence would be accepted without question, leading to Elena's quick execution and his own advancement in the royal court. "Your Majesty," Grimwald protested, "surely the word of a disobedient guard cannot overturn official evidence gathered by your own investigators." The king's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you suggesting that I am incapable of determining truth from lies, Lord Chancellor?" Grimwald quickly backed down, bowing deeply. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely thought you thought incorrectly," the king interrupted. "Sir Marcus has proven himself to be observant and intelligent, regardless of his issues with authority. His challenge to the evidence deserves serious consideration." As the court dispersed for the night, Marcus felt a mixture of hope and dread. He had bought Elena some time and cast doubt on the charges against her, but he had also made powerful enemies. Lord Grimwald would not forget this humiliation, and Prince Richard now saw him as a direct threat. As he was escorted to his quarters under guard, Marcus caught sight of Princess Elena being led away by her attendants. She looked back at him with tears in her eyes and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Marcus nodded once in return, knowing that tomorrow would bring either vindication or doom for both of them. Dawn broke gray and cold over the palace courtyard where the trial by combat would take place. Marcus had spent the night in a guarded chamber, unable to sleep as he prepared mentally for what might be his final day. He had faced many opponents in training and border skirmishes, but never with so much at stake. The investigation had begun at first light. King Aldwin personally led a team of trusted guards to search Prince Richard's chambers, while the prince protested loudly about the violation of his privacy. What they found confirmed Marcus's suspicions and horrified the court. Hidden beneath Richard's mattress were practice sheets showing attempts to forge Elena's handwriting. The prince had spent weeks perfecting her signature and letter formation. In his desk drawer, they discovered bottles of different inks and several sheets of the same paper used for the false letters. Most damning of all was a diary where Richard had recorded his plans in detail. He wrote about his jealousy of Elena's popularity and his fear that their father might change the succession to favor her instead of him. The diary revealed Richard's meetings with Lord Grimwald, who had promised to support the prince's claim to the throne in exchange for future political power. When confronted with this evidence, Prince Richard's carefully maintained innocence crumbled. He raged about his birthright and accused Elena of turning the people against him with her false kindness. His true nature was finally revealed for all to see. "She makes me look bad just by existing," Richard shouted at his father. "The people love her more than they will ever love me. How can I rule a kingdom that would rather have her as their queen?" King Aldwin stared at his son with a mixture of heartbreak and disgust. "You would have had your sister executed to secure a throne that was already yours? What kind of monster have you become?" The revelation sent shockwaves through the court. Several nobles who had supported Richard quickly distanced themselves, while others began whispering about Elena's obvious fitness to rule. The princess herself seemed stunned by her brother's betrayal, tears streaming down her face. With Richard's guilt established, the charges against Elena were formally dropped. The trial by combat was no longer necessary, as there was no longer any accusation to defend against. Marcus should have felt relief and victory, but instead he felt empty. A family had been destroyed and a kingdom's future thrown into chaos. Lord Grimwald was arrested as a co-conspirator and led away in chains. His dreams of power ended forever. Prince Richard was stripped of his titles and succession rights, then banished from the kingdom under penalty of death if he ever returned. As the morning's dramatic events concluded, Princess Elena approached Marcus in the courtyard. She was no longer surrounded by guards, but by ladies-in-waiting and loyal courtiers who had always supported her. "Sir Marcus," she said softly, "I owe you my life. Without your courage and intelligence, I would have died for crimes I never committed." Marcus bowed respectfully. "I only did what was right, Your Highness. Justice demanded nothing less." Elena studied his face for a moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone present. "Father," she called to the king, who was standing nearby, still looking stunned by the morning's revelations. "I have a request to make." King Aldwin approached his daughter, his expression gentle for the first time in months. The discovery of Richard's betrayal had shaken him deeply, but it had also reminded him of Elena's true character and worth. "What is it, my daughter?" he asked. "I want Sir Marcus to become captain of my personal guard," Elena announced. "When I am queen, I will need advisors who value truth over convenience and justice over politics. Marcus has proven himself to be exactly that kind of man." The suggestion caused another stir among the courtiers. Marcus was just a common guard, not a noble or politician. But Elena's near-death experience had given her a new perspective on what truly mattered in leadership. Marcus looked shocked. "Your Highness, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm not qualified for such a position. I don't have the education or background of a royal advisor." Elena smiled, and for the first time in days it reached her eyes. "You have something more valuable than education or noble birth, Marcus. You have integrity. You were willing to risk everything to protect someone you believed was innocent, even though it would have been easier to follow orders." King Aldwin considered his daughter's request carefully. The traditional choice would be to promote one of the existing officers or appoint someone from an established noble family. But the events of the past few days had shown him the dangers of surrounding himself with people who told him only what he wanted to hear. "Sir Marcus," the king said formally, "my daughter speaks wisely. Will you accept the position of captain of the Princess Guard, with all the responsibilities and honors that come with it?" Marcus felt overwhelmed. Just yesterday, he had been a disobedient soldier facing possible execution. Now he was being offered one of the most prestigious positions in the royal court. But as he looked at Princess Elena's hopeful face, he realized this wasn't really about him at all. It was about building a better future for the kingdom. "I accept, Your Majesty," he said quietly, "but I must warn you both that I will continue to speak the truth as I see it, even when it's uncomfortable to hear." Elena laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed across the courtyard. "That's exactly why we need you, Marcus. A ruler who only hears agreeable lies will make terrible decisions. We need someone who will tell us when we're wrong." As the formal ceremony concluded and the court began to disperse, Marcus realized that his life had changed completely in the span of 2 days. He had gone from being an outsider who questioned authority to being part of the authority himself. The irony wasn't lost on him, but as he watched Elena speaking kindly to the servants and guards around her, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. She would make an excellent queen someday, and he would do everything in his power to help her succeed. The kingdom had been saved from a terrible injustice, but more importantly, it had found a leader who valued truth and mercy over political convenience. Marcus had followed no orders that day when he refused to arrest Elena, but when the youngest princess spoke, asking him to help build a better future, he knew he would follow her anywhere. 6 months after becoming captain of the Princess Guard, Marcus had settled into his new role with determination and growing confidence. Princess Elena had been officially named heir to the throne following Richard's banishment, and the kingdom was slowly healing from the political turmoil that had nearly destroyed the royal family. Marcus found that his new position came with challenges he had never anticipated. As a common guard, he had only needed to worry about following or refusing orders. As a captain and royal advisor, he discovered that leadership meant making difficult decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives. Elena had insisted on implementing reforms throughout the kingdom based on the lessons learned from Richard's conspiracy. Together, they established new protocols requiring multiple sources of evidence for any serious accusations, created appeals processes for those accused of crimes, and most controversially, opened regular audiences where common citizens could bring grievances directly to the princess. The changes were popular with the common people, but created tension with many nobles who preferred the old system where their word was rarely questioned. Marcus found himself navigating complex political situations that tested his diplomatic skills as much as his sense of justice. One morning, Marcus was reviewing security arrangements for Elena's upcoming tour of the northern provinces when a commotion erupted in the courtyard below his office window. Looking down, he saw a crowd of angry farmers and their families demanding an audience with the princess. Elena had been meeting with foreign ambassadors all morning, but when she heard about the crowd, she immediately canceled her remaining appointments and asked Marcus to escort her to the courtyard. This was exactly the kind of impulsive decision that worried her father and made the other nobles nervous. But Marcus had learned to appreciate Elena's direct approach to governance. The farmers were led by an older man named Willem, whose weathered face showed the strain of recent hardships. When Elena appeared, the crowd fell silent, unsure how to address royalty in such an informal setting. "Please," Elena said warmly, "tell me why you've come. I'm here to listen." Willem stepped forward, hat in hand, and began to explain their situation. A drought had destroyed most of their crops, but the local tax collectors were still demanding full payment based on expected harvests rather than actual yields. Families were being forced to sell their livestock and tools just to avoid prison, leaving them with no way to plant next year's crops. "The tax collectors say they're just following orders from Lord Brennan," Willem explained. "They won't listen when we try to explain about the drought. Some families have already lost their farms entirely." Elena's face grew serious as she listened. Lord Brennan was one of the regional governors appointed by her father, known for his efficiency in collecting taxes but notorious for his lack of compassion. Marcus had encountered him several times and found him to be exactly the kind of official who followed orders without considering their human impact. "Marcus," Elena said quietly, "what do you know about the situation in Lord Brennan's territory?" Marcus had actually been receiving reports about increasing unrest in that region, though the official dispatches from Lord Brennan claimed everything was running smoothly. The disconnect between the official reports and the reality standing before them was troubling. The official reports indicate normal tax collection and no significant problems, Marcus replied carefully, "but I've been hearing unofficial accounts that suggest otherwise." Elena nodded thoughtfully, then addressed the crowd again. "I want to investigate this situation personally. Willem, would you and several other representatives be willing to guide me through your region so I can see the conditions firsthand?" The farmers looked shocked that a princess would offer to visit their humble villages, but Willem nodded eagerly. "We would be honored, Your Highness, but Lord Brennan won't be pleased about royal interference in his territory. Lord Brennan works for the crown, not the other way around," Elena replied firmly. "If he's implementing policies that harm the people he's supposed to serve, then we need to address that immediately." Marcus felt both pride and concern at Elena's response. Her instinct to help the suffering farmers was admirable, but challenging an established lord like Brennan could have serious political consequences. The king had been working to maintain stability after Richard's scandal, and another major confrontation with regional nobility might be problematic. Later that afternoon, Marcus met privately with Elena in her study to discuss the logistics of the proposed visit. The room was lined with books on law, history, and governance that Elena studied religiously in preparation for her future reign. "You're worried about the political implications," Elena observed as Marcus outlined security concerns for the journey. "I'm worried about your safety and the kingdom's stability," Marcus replied honestly. "Lord Brennan has significant support among the other regional governors. If we move against him without overwhelming evidence, it could trigger broader opposition to your succession." Elena set down her quill and looked at Marcus seriously. "But if we ignore the suffering of these farmers, what kind of leaders does that make us? How can I claim to serve justice if I'm afraid to confront injustice when I see it?" Marcus recognized the same moral struggle that had defined his own career as a guard. The choice between political safety and doing what was right was never easy, but it was often the most important choice a leader could make. "You're right," he admitted, "but we need to be smart about how we handle this. Lord Brennan is cunning and well-connected. If we're going to challenge him, we need to be prepared for a fight." Over the next 3 days, Elena and Marcus planned their expedition carefully. They would travel with a small guard unit to avoid appearing threatening, but Marcus secretly arranged for additional security to be positioned throughout the region. Elena insisted on bringing her own investigators rather than relying on Lord Brennan's officials. The night before their departure, Elena found Marcus in the armory checking weapons and supplies. She had traded her usual elegant dresses for practical traveling clothes, and her excitement about the mission was obvious. "Marcus," she said, "I want you to know how much your counsel means to me. Father's other advisors tell me what they think I want to hear, but you tell me what I need to know. That's exactly what I'll need when I'm queen." Marcus looked up from the sword he was sharpening. "Your Highness, I think you already understand leadership better than many people who have ruled for decades. Your instinct to put the people's welfare first will make you an excellent queen." Elena smiled, but Marcus could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. She was only 17 now, but the events of the past year had forced her to mature quickly. The innocent girl who had once spent her days reading in the garden was becoming a formidable leader. "I just hope I'm strong enough for what lies ahead," she said quietly. "You are," Marcus assured her, "and you won't be facing it alone." The journey to Lord Brennan's territory took 2 days through countryside that told its own story of hardship. Marcus rode beside Elena's carriage, watching as they passed abandoned farmhouses and fields that should have been green with growing crops but lay brown and barren. The drought had been worse than anyone at the palace had realized. When they arrived at the first village, the contrast between the official reports and reality became starkly apparent. Children with hollow cheeks watched them from doorways, and many adults looked thin and desperate. Yet this was supposed to be a prosperous region according to Lord Brennan's documents. Willem met them at the village center with several other farmers who had made the journey to the capital. Their relief at seeing Elena was obvious, but Marcus noticed how they kept glancing nervously toward the road leading to Lord Brennan's manor house. "He knows you're coming, Your Highness," Willem explained quietly. "His tax collectors rode through yesterday asking questions about who had been complaining to the crown. Some folks are scared to talk now." Elena's jaw tightened with anger. "Are you telling me that Lord Brennan is intimidating people to prevent them from speaking truthfully to their future queen?" "Not directly," Willem replied carefully. "But his men made it clear that troublemakers might face extra attention during future tax assessments." Marcus felt his hand instinctively move toward his sword. This kind of intimidation was exactly what he had always hated about corrupt officials, who used their power to silence opposition. But he also recognized the delicate situation they were in. They needed evidence, not just accusations. "Willem," Elena said, "I want you to gather everyone who's willing to speak with me. I promise that anyone who tells the truth will be protected from retaliation." Over the next several hours, Elena listened to story after story of families pushed to the brink of starvation by inflexible tax demands. Marcus took careful notes while Elena's investigators documented everything. The pattern was clear. Lord Brennan was prioritizing tax collection over the welfare of the people he governed, but the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Mary, the village baker, approached Elena hesitantly near evening with information she had been afraid to share earlier. "Your Highness," Mary whispered, "there's something else you should know about Lord Brennan. He's been selling the grain from the tax collections to merchants in the neighboring kingdom instead of storing it for the royal granaries." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. If this was true, Lord Brennan wasn't just being harsh with tax collection. He was stealing from the crown and potentially supplying their enemies with resources. "Are you certain of this?" Elena asked. Mary nodded. "My cousin works at the docks where they load the grain wagons. She's seen the Valyrian merchants paying Lord Brennan directly, and the wagons head north instead of south toward the capital." This was the evidence they needed. Tax policy disputes were one thing, but selling royal resources to foreign buyers was clear treason. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction that Lord Brennan had overreached in his greed. The next morning, Elena requested a formal meeting with Lord Brennan at his manor house. He arrived with great ceremony, clearly intending to overwhelm the young princess with displays of wealth and authority. Brennan was a large, imposing man with expensive clothes and jewelry that seemed excessive for a regional governor. "Your Highness," he said with an elaborate bow that somehow managed to seem mocking, "what an unexpected honor to have you visit our humble region. I trust you found everything in good order?" Elena sat straight in her chair, every inch the future queen despite her youth. Marcus stood behind her, hand resting casually on his sword hilt in a way that Lord Brennan couldn't fail to notice. "Lord Brennan," Elena said formally, "I've received reports of concerning conditions in your territory. I'd like to discuss the implementation of tax policy during this drought period." Brennan's smile didn't waver, but Marcus saw his eyes grow cold. "Your Highness, I assure you that all tax collection has been conducted according to royal decree. If some farmers are complaining, it's likely because they're trying to avoid their lawful obligations. What about the grain sales to Valyrian merchants?" Elena asked quietly. The question hit Brennan like a physical blow. His confident expression crumbled, and Marcus saw fear flash across his face before he attempted to recover his composure. "I don't know what you're referring to," Brennan stammered. "All collected taxes are properly documented and sent to the royal treasury." Elena produced the detailed testimony they had gathered, along with shipping records that Marcus's investigators had obtained from cooperative dock workers. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "Lord Brennan," Elena said, her voice carrying new authority, "you are hereby stripped of your position and placed under arrest for treason against the crown. You have stolen from the royal treasury, sold resources to foreign nations, and oppressed the people under your care." Brennan's facade finally collapsed completely. "You have no authority here," he shouted. "You're just a girl playing at being queen. Your father will never support this interference." Marcus stepped forward, his sword now clearly visible. "You will address Her Highness with proper respect, or you will be silent." The confrontation that followed was swift but decisive. Brennan's personal guards, faced with the choice between loyalty to their corrupt master and loyalty to the crown, chose wisely. Within an hour, Brennan was in chains and his stolen wealth was being catalogued for return to the royal treasury. Elena immediately suspended all tax collection in the region until after the next harvest and arranged for emergency food supplies to be distributed to the most desperate families. She also appointed Willem as temporary administrator, making him the first common farmer to hold such a position. The journey back to the capital was triumphant but thoughtful. Elena had successfully handled her first major test as future queen, proving that she could make difficult decisions and follow them through despite political pressure. "Marcus," she said as they rode through the palace gates, "do you think we did the right thing?" Marcus looked at the young woman who had grown so much in just a few days. "Your Highness, you saved families from starvation and protected the kingdom from a traitor. History will remember this as the moment you truly became a leader." 3 months later, King Aldwin officially abdicated in favor of his daughter, citing his desire to see the kingdom in capable hands while he was still alive to advise her. Elena's coronation was attended by farmers and nobles alike, including Willem, who had traveled from his new administrative post to witness her triumph. Marcus stood at Elena's side during the ceremony, no longer the disobedient guard who questioned orders, but the loyal captain who had helped shape a future queen. When Elena took her oath to protect and serve her people, Marcus knew that she would keep that promise. The kingdom had found not just a new queen, but a new way of governing based on justice, compassion, and the courage to do what was right even when it was difficult. And it had all started with a guard who refused to follow unjust orders and a princess who spoke up for truth when it mattered most. Years later, when historians wrote about Queen Elena's reign, they would mark her confrontation with Lord Brennan as the beginning of a golden age of justice and prosperity. But Marcus always remembered it as the day a young princess became the leader her kingdom desperately needed.